All right. Hello, everyone. I've received a message from co-chair Kathy Garneau. She's running a little late, but we will begin as soon as she is here. She and it seems Senator Miller or Cody Miller Holcomb will be representing the EPC today. So yeah, just I ask for your patience as we wait for co-chair Garneau to arrive. So thank you.
Hi.
Hey there. How are we?
Good. Tired. Very exhausted.
I can imagine. I can imagine. Thank you both for coming. I was waiting for co-chair
Thank
Garno.
you for promoting me.
That was all Eric. I thought that was gonna, but yeah, it was all Eric.
I think we should play the fight song just to bring everybody's spirits up.
Sure, let's do that.
Ruby, you look adorable.
Thank you. Kathy will be on her way. She is driving home from work right now.
Sounds good. But yeah, I'm down for the fight song if everyone else is.
I made my friend have to get a ride home from someone else because I wasn't gonna miss this. So
got it. Yep, so we'll just be waiting for her, and then we will begin promptly to respect everyone's time.
how many people are in the panelists already?
Panelists, only a few of us. Speaker Krasik will be here with us. And then it should just be you three from the EPC, you from the Judicial Council, Ruby, Kathy, Eric, of course, because he has to do it, and then Speaker Krasik and myself. That should be all the panelists. Everyone else will be attendees. To keep a good flow, we don't
need people speaking out of term.
Yeah, they keep a good flow. Yeah.
Have unwanted
Don't need any
speeches.
It's a sensitive topic today. We don't certainly don't need anyone fighting.
We'll go with outbursts for the vocabulary.
Outbursts for the vocabulary.
Certainly.
I hope you all know that after this, I will be taking a very long nap. Coincidentally, after the whole thing last night, the fire alarm in my building went off at 12:30.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I didn't get to bed until about 1:45, and I had to be up at 3:30.
Wow.
So I'm very much only running on 2 hours of sleep.
That's painful. That's painful to hear. That doesn't sound fun. Okay, let me see. Chat here. No chat messages.
Dakota, would you mind putting a message in Slack, seeing if anyone is available to come? We would like to reach quorum.
Sounds good.
All right, let's cue the fight song, Eric.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Senate Speaker Dakota Shabiro. For those who don't know, I know we have a few people in here from the Herald to watch. So today, this is just really a question and answer sort of thing. We have gathered from the last 2 days 16 responses with multiple questions per response for the EPC, the Election Promotions Committee, to answer, as there was a lot of confusion in the Senate, and I'm sure some confusion in the House regarding the current election process. Let me start by saying that all the questions are provided anonymously. There are no names taken. I have submitted no questions, so none of them are from me, or I'm not sure about the other speaker, but none of them are from me, as I was the one collecting them. As we move forward, I just want to ask if there are any opening remarks from the EPC before we begin.
Yeah, could we start by obtaining quorum?
This meeting doesn't particularly need quorum, as the Senate voted to sort of not have it that way, just as a question and answer. But we can take attendance if you would like.
I'd prefer having quorum.
Okay. For those who are here, considering we have attendees, just type here in the chat. May I ask why you would like quorum? Just because. I'm here. Speaker Gonzalez, I know, is here. Senator Smith. So just look. No. Senator Holcomb, yes. Fitzsimmons, no. Pastor, no. Mutumbo, yes. Lewis, no. Doris. Senator Doris is a no. Thank you, Senator Doris. You are a yes. Meldrum Roy, Senator Meldrum Roy, you're a yes. Senator Ewing. We are not voting on anything, President West. No Senator Ewing, Senator Sanchez, no Senator Sanchez. Senator Taylor, no. Senator Griggs, no. Senator DeMarco, no. Tamang, no. Busal Chetri, no. Byrne, yes. Rowan, no. Shafaya, no. Leinhart, no. Speaker Krosick, yes. Is Colin here? Do you know? Nope. Okay.
I don't believe so.
All right. Would all representatives go ahead and put here in the chat if you're here, and I'll just mark you off. Pruitt. Thank you.
I'm only seeing one representative in the attendees, and it's Representative Relko.
Oh, here. We got Seiden and Pruitt here.
Oh, yeah. I didn't see them.
Yes. And then Ralco, you said. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
What is our quorum?
What is our quorum? Not reached by far.
Yeah.
Simply because of the nature of the meeting, of course. There was no, because we're not voting on anything, no quorum is necessary, but just to see who is here, per the request of Vice President Eagle. Where is Ralco's thing on here? I'll just say there you go. Kathy Garneau, you're here. I'll put you down. I'll put you down as a representative. So we have what appears to be 12 members of the legislature in attendance. I don't know how many are watching on YouTube. Of course, that doesn't give us any official quorum, so no voting will take place. Of course, there was no intention to begin voting on anything. But with that said, that's what we have. We have 12. So moving on, any other opening statements before we begin the question segment?
Yes. Ashley, since we do not have quorum, would you like me to start with my opening statement? All right, I will go ahead with mine. So it seems that the hot topic of Jacoby's inappropriate statement on Wednesday was regarding the bias of the EPC and how that disadvantaged his slate. Dakota, you chose to use the word corrupt to describe my behavior and how Kathy and I conducted this election. So let me highlight the multiple instances in which my corrupt behavior was to the benefit of the Right Mutumbo slate. First, let's touch on the social media promotion. For those who aren't aware, the Right Mutumbo slate purchased sponsorship through Instagram to have a post on their campaign page promoted through election week. I gave the Right Mutumbo slate a deadline of Wednesday at noon of election week to remove the sponsored post as it was a direct violation of the SEC. The post was not removed until around 11:50 of that Wednesday. You could say that I was very corrupt in giving such loose terms and being so lenient towards such an egregious offense of the SEC. In fact, a member of the Morris Effinger slate could very easily have filed a complaint against me for showing bias towards the Right Mutumbo slate. Secondly, during election week, I became aware that Jacoby was actively campaigning in classrooms. Due to my very poor ability to efficiently do my job, I chose not to press for names of the professors so that the EPC could conduct an investigation to submit to the Judicial Council. This complete negligence on my end and absolute failure to issue a demerit greatly benefited the Right Mutumbo slate and clearly shows my deeply rooted bias against the Morris Effinger slate. Thirdly, let me address what happens when an individual's anonymity is breached. When a demerit was issued by the Judicial Council for inappropriate email use, President West decided to abuse her presidential power and call the individual who submitted the initial complaint to the EPC and attempted to pressure the individual to revoke their complaint. The fall semester clearly showed me that I would be asked to resign should I speak up against constitutional breaches. So because I am so corrupt, I decided I would do absolutely nothing. Had the individual revoked their complaint, that would indeed show that I have a positive bias towards the Right Mutumbo slate and wanted them to prevail in the election. Another point to notice, when President West and Jacoby chose to harass this complainant, they broke not only the SEC, but the official WMU Code of Student Conduct as well. These phone calls meant to intimidate and coerce the complainant to revoke their statement, had they been reported to the Office of Student Conduct, could have led to both individuals receiving discretionary sanctions from the university. Fourthly, the evening following the election, I received a campaign receipt from the Right Mutumbo slate around 8 p.m. The SEC clearly states receipts are due within 1 week of purchase or by the close of the election, whichever comes sooner. I myself have received a demerit for this offense in my own election, so trust me or don't trust me because clearly I've shown I shouldn't be trusted. I know it's an offense. But because I am so corrupt, I felt pity that the Right Mutumbo slate had received so many demerits, so I actually chose not to issue a demerit. This clearly indicates I am a biased individual and again disadvantaged the Morris Effinger campaign. Moving on to some additional allegations that the EPC is acting as co-chairs, not a committee. Please show me what committee members you are aware of that I am not. I understand it was probably confusing when Senator Miller Holcomb announced he was a member of the EPC. For clarification, with the passing of the current Constitution, senators were assigned to vice president committees. As vice president for Rules, Bylaws, and Administration, I received an RBA committee. That is the committee that Senator Holcomb sits on. There was a time when Senator Lauren McCray also sat on my RBA committee, and she went on to be a member of the Right Mutumbo campaign. If we all recall the SEC, members and former members of the EPC cannot endorse or work on campaign teams the year that they serve. Had Senator McCray been on the EPC, it would not have been allowed for her to serve on the Right Mutumbo team. The only members of the EPC committee are myself and Kathy, as we are both confirmed members, and no one has ever submitted an application to be on the committee. Charles, you can correct me if I'm wrong, and there's just a pool of applicants somewhere that I've never received. Yes, I have RBA committee members, and I allowed them to be privy to some election information because I'm corrupt, unbiased, and unable to remain confidential. But those RBA committee members do not equate EPC members, and we can go ahead and pull out the SEC and define what an elected EPC member is if anyone would like that. I will say it's a good thing Kathy and I are the only members because certain members of the RBA committee breached confidentiality as early as March of this year by acting as an informant for the Right Mutumbo slate, providing them with confidential election information. This election was to be conducted, and it was conducted, as fair as possible for all members involved. Every complaint that was submitted to the EPC was thoroughly reviewed by Kathy and myself, who then wrote a report and submitted that, along with all of the evidence, to the Judicial Council, as outlined in the SEC. And let me point out that this SEC document went up for confirmation not once, but twice to all of you who are here in attendance today. If there was an issue with complaints being forwarded along to the Judicial Council, then those should have been addressed when the SEC went up, not when someone has broken the SEC so many times they face disqualification and want to find a way out of it. Dakota, you pulled up a section of the SEC Wednesday that outlined what occurs when the EPC notices a violation. That occurred this year. We noticed that the Right Mutumbo slate didn't submit a receipt for promotions that we were aware of. Since we ourselves, the authors of the document, and the members of the EPC issued a demerit. Further into the SEC, we see the procedure outlined for when a complaint is submitted to the EPC. The EPC is granted the power to conduct an investigation, take statements, etc. But after all of that occurs, a report of the investigation, along with the original complaint and all evidence, must be submitted to the Judicial Council. In past years, this is exactly how the process has occurred. And maybe if Benjamin Johnson wasn't forced to resign, he would have been present on Wednesday to inform you that that is exactly how he conducted the election last year. To address the point that 10 times during the document it is written at the discretion of the EPC, let's turn to Google and use a dictionary. Discretion is a noun, and the first definition is the quality of behaving or speaking in such a way as to avoid causing offense or revealing private information. Well, I would say that up until Jacoby gave an inappropriate statement on Wednesday, the EPC handled this election with full discretion. The second definition given is the freedom to decide what should be done in a particular situation. Kathy, I don't know about you, but nobody forced me to write a report for the complaint submitted. Nobody forced me to submit anything to the Judicial Council. Nobody forced me to issue a demerit to the Right Mutumbo slate. Those were decisions Kathy and I came to equally. Kind of like we used our freedom to decide. I would also like to point out that the Right Mutumbo slate has sat through several meetings where Chris himself informed everyone that when complaints were submitted, the EPC has no power to issue a demerit. That completely contradicts the account Jacoby gave you all on Wednesday in an attempt to discredit the EPC, the Judicial Council, and the election as a whole. The election code does not bend to the will of candidates. The code serves as rules to ensure a fair election is offered for all. Why do we have rules if we are going to investigate the enforcers of the rules when someone breaks them? If the issue here is that this wasn't a fair election for the Right Mutumbo slate, then I ask you all to consider this. Nobody forced the Right Mutumbo slate to break the SEC over 10 times. Nobody set out to disqualify this slate. In fact, the EPC originally wanted the Judicial Council to vote on the decision to allow the Morris Effinger campaign to appear on the ballot. Yet another instance where you could say the EPC is corrupt and positively biased toward the Right Mutumbo slate. Complaints were submitted to the RBA email, and as they were submitted, they were reviewed and forwarded to the Judicial Council. The EPC issued one demerit themselves because it was violation that we noticed no complaint was submitted. The EPC is afforded the power to conduct a fair election, and this election was fair in every way. If at any time a candidate thought that the EPC was in violation of providing a fair election, they could have submitted a formal complaint against the EPC as outlined in the SEC. No such complaint was ever submitted. Disqualification was only brought up for conversation when 7 complaints had been submitted to the Judicial Council, with pictures and video evidence clearly proving violations occurred. Thank you for your time, and now I will allow Kathy to give her statement.
All right, is there any problems with me giving a statement right now? Are we cool?
You're free to give your statement.
All right, thank you, Speaker Shapiro. Good evening, Senate and fellow House members of WSA. In the aftermath of the most recent election, I'm interested in sharing a statement in the interest of total transparency as requested by Speaker Shapiro on Wednesday. What I am sharing is merely what I have observed or heard during the last semester through the campaign season and my thoughts regarding recent statements made towards the EPC's processes. First and foremost, I would like to thank the Judicial Council for spending at least 10 hours of volunteer work and attending the meetings necessary for keeping this election moving. This includes a nearly 5-hour-long meeting last night that allowed the EPC to certify the election. The Wright Mutumbo slate have made numerous breaks in the student election code, some of which were reported to us by way of complaint, and some of which are still rumors without tangible evidence. Of the breaks in the SEC that Ruby and I are aware of at this point in time, the Wright Mutumbo slate has had 6 unique complaints filed against them that were assessed by the EPC. Only one of these complaints came directly from the EPC, of which being a receipt that was not turned into us within the required time frame. Of the 6 in total, only 4 were able to be assessed in the time frame of the complaints coming into our inboxes, to being assessed, to being sent to the Judicial Council, and then being heard twice over due to the Wright Mutumbo slate exercising their constitutional right to appeal all of those demerits. This process is outlined in the SEC under Article 2, Section 2. It is also the process that our predecessors have followed. Each complaint that the EPC assessed and then turned over to the Judicial Council, who ruled either in favor or against issuing the complaint as a demerit, was appealed not on the grounds of not having broken the initial rule stated in the SEC, but that our process broke the SEC guidelines. Again, the process that I've outlined is written directly into the Student Election Code. Other various complaints about our process included holding up the anonymity of the complaints sent in. I would like to state for the record that the EPC was made aware of an instance in which an individual who turned in a complaint had their anonymity breached and was then pressured by President West to revoke that complaint. I am not stating this to sully President West's name, but to provide the requested transparency to this election process. I would also like to state that this allegation came from our advisor, and thus I believe this provides enough backing to not dismiss the claim as unsubstantiated rumor. We have held the anonymity of those who turn in complaints to the EPC so closely because this has become yet another example of what happens when anonymity is breached within this organization. This is not the first time in which this organization has strong-armed individuals of dissenting opinions, and I need only direct your attention to the resignation scandal at the beginning of the year as yet another example of this, specifically in reference to the forced resignation of multiple cabinet members of WSA. There was a statement that Speaker Shapiro made on Wednesday that concerned me due to the divisive nature of the statement. Speaker Shapiro asked how we as an organization can have confidence in a slate that clearly did not win the popular vote due to the inability to certify the election until after the Wright Mutumbo disqualification. I believe that is a fair concern to have, but I would like to be on the record with my opinion of the following facts. First, the Wright Mutumbo slate had a total of 4 demerits that were assessed to their slate, 3 of which remained after the appeals on those demerits. The 3 demerits that the Judicial Council chose not to appeal were as following. 1, a chalking infraction at Miller on the day of an event put together by a member of the opposing slate, of which, had the Wright Mutumbo slate merely chalked on the flat sidewalk further away, they would have been fine. 2, the Wright Mutumbo slate bought an Instagram social media advertising boost on the Sunday before election week. I don't care. Which ran until Wednesday at 11:50 a.m., 10 minutes before the EPC's deadline of allowing the Wright Mutumbo slate to pull it down. We had 2 complaints regarding this infraction, and we chose to only process 1. And 3, with the reference to the previous social media infraction, the EPC was never given a receipt or proof of purchase within the established deadline outlined in the SEC, and thus issued a final demerit. Why am I restating this? Because I am of the opinion that these demerits alone provide reasonable doubt to the legitimacy of the slate having won the popular vote, as each of these infractions could have easily been the difference between the small gap between both slates. It is because of this reasoning that the EPC took these demerits as seriously as we did and delayed certifying the election until the Judicial Council could provide an unbiased judgment. The Student Election Code exists in order to provide a fair and reasonable election process and to give each candidate the slate the ability to run provided they meet the base requirements to submit an intent to run form. It exists in order to ensure that no one candidate can manipulate their position, power, or authority in order to sway the vote. Furthermore, it is a document that was voted on twice by the Senate and the House, an action which states plainly that both legislative bodies have read, understood, and are in support of the document. Any problems regarding those documents had more than enough time to be rectified within both windows of opportunity. Additionally, the EPC was made up of two people, myself and Ruby Eagle. No other individual other than myself was voted to be a member of the EPC. Ruby and I, making decisions about the election as the two of us, were operating as the entirety of the EPC. I apologize that this election has run longer and messier than many of you would have preferred. I promise you it did not go in the direction that any of us who were involved appreciated either. Unfortunately, in the interest of keeping things from being rushed, in order to meet various quorums among the judicial court, and in order to accommodate requests to provide oral statements in lieu of written statements, we were all tasked with the order of moving mountains. We did all of this to provide each slate the most unbiased opportunity possible. We withheld demerit assessments from the public until the judicial court had met to avoid unnecessary drama. Finally, we operated as closely to the written word as possible with regards to multiple, unprecedented, never before dealt with scenarios that we encountered along the way. Finally, I want to make one last point in reference to the nature of the Senate meeting's discussion on the election on Wednesday, in which Ruby and I were not present for. This organization was built on passion with providing a service to the student body. WSA is a unique opportunity afforded to our peers to have the ability to provide real, substantial change to our campus. We see it every year, from Lauren Smith's previous campus projects to unify our campus to Taylor West's Social Justice Fund. We see it within the organization, most notably from my memory being the current state and structure of our organization being primarily thanks to one Benjamin Johnson's attempts at making WSA more professional. The individuals who join WSA are not your average students, but are students who are highly motivated by trying to make this campus a better place. Not a single one of you are bad people. But passion can lead us to being quick to anger, quick to judgment, and quick to action. It can cloud the way that we see the events surrounding us and keep us from making unbiased opinions. The election season of WSA has previously and will likely always be a moment in time in which this organization watches tensions run incredibly high and passion driving individuals before measured judgment. At the same time, campaign season will always serve as a make or break moment for our potential slates. Nothing will be more stressful than campaigning for presidency and vice presidency of this organization, and nothing will prepare the slate who wins, regardless of how, to handle the year ahead of them. I have seen this passion drive individuals to fantastic highs, but I have also seen this passion lead to some very unfortunate severing of real relationships. I encourage you all to try to not let your passion lead you to making hasty decisions, and instead use that to remind yourself of why we all gather to WSA on Wednesday afternoons. At the end of the day, this is an RSO. And like all RSOs, we flock to it for community, to engage with like-minded individuals, and to drive the best out of a school we begrudgingly love. Try to assume that every person acting for this organization in any capacity is doing so for the best of the organization, because that is what will keep this organization running for 100 more years. I want to state that nothing I said in the statement was meant as an attack to named individuals. Again, Speaker Shapiro requested for transparency on Wednesday, and I wanted to provide as much transparency without being too redundant as possible. Any information that was withheld up to this point was not done so out of malice or self-serving purposes, but in the interest of allowing both slates the opportunity for the fairest chance at presidency as possible. We withheld information in the interest of allowing the Judicial Council the chance to provide as unbiased of opinions as possible, and we did not disclose the substance of certain demerits because all it does is provide room for drama in an organization that does not need the assistance of it. My goal this year was to provide the fairest election possible and to ensure that regardless of the outcome, that the slate who wins does so because they deserve the privilege of serving our student body next year. I truly believe that I have accomplished this goal. If you disagree, I encourage you to reach out to me privately so that I can help whomever is here next year with ensuring that it runs better. Thank you for your time, and I yield.
Thank you both for that. Chief Justice Putman Murray, did you have anything you'd like to say? You didn't? You're muted if you are talking. I can't hear you. Of course.
Sorry, I'm just making sure that I'm good to give my report and my statement. That's all.
Okay. Report and statement regarding the election, or you have a statement similar to theirs?
Report about the election.
Okay.
And I am. So, hello everyone. Thank you so much for attending. Like Kathy and Ruby had both stated, last night, the Judicial Council and myself were able to hold an appeals hearing for the Mutumbo Right campaign slate, where we were able to officially get the election certified. The Judicial Council, after the report has been out, it will be released to the public here shortly. We have come to the decision that the Right Mutumbo campaign slate has been disqualified due to the fact that they have reached 3 demerits. One of the demerits has been posted already, and that was outlining with a chalk violation. The second and third one will be posted, as those were the 2 appeals that were done last night. So those ones will be available up on the website and on social media for everyone to go ahead and look at. And therefore, we are able to actually certify the election. And I just wanted to give everyone an update, since I know that for full transparency, that's what we're all here for today.
Thank you so much for that. Before we move into questions, as that was the initial reason for us being here, but I do appreciate what was said. I do want to ensure that I am understanding my role in both your speeches, considering you mentioned that I used the word corrupt. The exact context was, if it is the case that wrongdoing did occur, then one could describe it as corrupt. At no point, and this is my official apology, at no point did I mean to insinuate that I thought you were corrupt, Vice President Eagle, and at no point was I trying to be divisive. I certainly was just confused. And if you watch the meeting, Chris was quick to explain to me where I was wrong, and I very much, what would the word be, submitted that I was wrong. So I would like to apologize if at any point I made you feel like I was calling you corrupt. I certainly wasn't. But there were claims being made, and as I said, if that were the case, that the claims were true, and that might have been a mistake on my part for saying that. So, moving on, we'll enter the question period. So, once again, as stated before, these questions are anonymously submitted by anyone who had access to the link. Ideally, legislators in the WSA would have submitted their questions. None of these questions were submitted by me, and none of them were submitted, I believe, by any of the legislative leadership that I know of, only by the legislators themselves. So we will begin. Is everyone ready? Is that a raise hand?
Yeah, I just have a question if we're going to be taking any Q&A from the webinar.
Yeah, so there will be, should an answer be misunderstood, or maybe someone has a small follow-up question, that will be accepted in the chat for you to answer, strictly for clarification or follow-up questions regarding the question that was being asked. No new questions, Representative Pruitt, will be allowed during this time. So with that said, I will move on to the first question. Though the process of assessing and issuing demerits might be on the basis of having a fair election for everyone, it seems unfair that all the demerits were brought to one slate by one party, presumably. I'm not sure if the EPC, I being the person who submitted this, by the way, and I'll put this in the chat. I'm not sure if the EPC can do anything about this, but is there any way we can address this unfairness? The demerit that is visible on the website seems very minor. I do not think that one slate would want to win based off something so small and unimportant that ended up disqualifying their other candidates. And in the chat, that will go for everyone to see. This is the question for those to read over.
I can address that first part of that. One party did not submit all of these demerits. We had multiple different individuals submit complaints that were then sent to the Judicial Council. We had, sometimes there was even more than one person that sent a complaint for the same violation. So not just one person submitted all these complaints. I would also like to make it clear that nobody that submitted complaints against the Right Mutumbo slate were associated with the Alexis Morris Effinger campaign. So these weren't complaints that were brought up by Alexis's and Eric's slate. The next, can we address the unfairness? There was no unfairness. Anyone is allowed to submit a complaint against anyone. The demerit is very minor. So if you have an issue with how violations can occur, again, the SEC went up for voting twice in front of the legislative body. So the exact instance that demerit came from is not following the chalking guidelines posted by WMU. So if there was an issue with that being a violation, then next year when the SEC goes up, you can certainly request to make that change.
Go ahead, Kathy.
I would also like to add on that while a lot of the rules are like do seem really minor, like it is really silly to get a demerit for chalking sometimes. That is why you are allowed 3 demerits before serious ramifications start happening. Like last year, Westwright got, I believe, 2 demerits, and then Ruby and Alex got 1 demerit. It is like okay to mess up, and it's okay to make a mistake. You're not going to get disqualified just because you chalked in the wrong place. But if you continually make errors in the SEC and break the SEC, particularly in like unique ways, there has to be some kind of liability there.
Thank you. Do we need any clarification from our attendees, or are there any follow-up questions? Seeing none, hearing none, we'll move on to the next question. Can the EPC be held responsible for any SEC contradictions as they only enforce the legislature approved SEC? I'll put that in. I didn't say that.
So in an instance like that, anyone is able to submit a complaint against the EPC. There's a deadline for that. If you think the EPC isn't doing their job, submit a complaint. In this instance, no one submitted a complaint. So what is the Judicial Council supposed to do?
Any other comment from the rest of the EPC or the Judicial Council representative?
Not to sound like a broken record, the SEC every year gets put up in front of the legislative body, who is meant to read, overview, and find ways in which to amend the SEC. So if there are contradictions, it goes through now 2 separate house, or the House and the Senate, across multiple weeks after a read-only period. There's plenty of time to go through and ensure that contradictions are fixed and amended. And if they are not, there are ways to submit complaints about the EPC to the Judicial Council to make sure that that doesn't happen again, which is also outlined, excuse me, in the EPC or in the SEC.
Thank you. Did I see something from? Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, just to clarify, the Judicial Council can only do as much as we are limited to in the Constitution. Therefore, like they have been saying before, if there were severe concerns about the EPC, you would be more willing to a complaint, and it would have gone through my court, and we would have more than gladly been willing to go through the SEC and hear your complaint, hear your side, and also take sides from the EPC as well. That's what we're here for, but unfortunately, we cannot do anything more than what we are constitutionally bounded to. And that's kind of really up to you guys as students, as legislative committee members, and as legislators and senators and House of Representatives.
Thank you. Do we need any clarification or are there any follow-up questions from our attendees? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to our next question. Would the EPC's delay have benefited the slate with demerits as the process was delayed until after election week? Into the chat that goes. No, that doesn't help that my thing kind of blends them together. Again, I'll read it again. Would the EPC's delay have benefited the slate with demerits as the process was delayed until after election week? Thank you.
Certainly, I think the argument could be, if you were a member of the Morris Effinger campaign, you certainly, I would imagine, would feel that the EPC's delay 100% benefited the Right Mutumbo slate because they received one demerit that was only just posted to our social media the other day. So if you weren't keeping track of our website, you would never know during election week that the Right Mutumbo slate had already received one demerit. And so these other multiple demerits not being assessed until last night, and nobody knowing that during election week, I feel like certainly someone who didn't know that there was this many demerits against a campaign, they certainly would be biased in whether or not they did or did not want to vote for that candidate.
Any other comments? Answers? No? Okay. Do we need any clarification or are there any follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to our next question. Why weren't demerits published within the 12-hour timeline as outlined in the SEC?
So Charles, our vice president of IT, published the demerit on the website at 5:55 p.m. I don't remember the exact date, but it's the day that Ashley submitted the first demerit assessment to him. He published that. I couldn't tell you why it wasn't published to our social media. Our vice president for PR did receive the graphic from me at the same time that Charles received the graphic for our website.
Does anyone need any clarification or are there any follow-up questions?
I do just want to add on to that. I do not have the password to any of our logins, so I couldn't post it myself. So it does not fall on the EPC that was not posted.
Hearing none, seeing none for our follow-ups or clarification. Next question. How long are the demerits? This question appears to have privileged information regarding a demerit. Are the demerits free to speak on?
Ashley just disclosed the election results.
Fair enough. Okay. How long were illegal social media advertisements up? Could this have been the cause of the slim difference in vote count?
So the illegal social media sponsorship was up until 11:50 of Wednesday of election week. So for half of election week, this sponsored post was up. I'm not sure what I can disclose about the vote counts, so I won't answer that second question.
Because that is a second question appears to be, what would that term be? Speculatory. So
use your best judgment. What do you think happens when someone has a sponsored post for half a week?
No, I was agreeing with you. You can't really answer that with actual accuracy because that's a speculatory question.
Correct.
Which I will attempt to exclude speculatory questions because that does not serve us going forward. Next question. Oh, thank you, Henry. Me and my own dictionary of words here. Speculative. All right. Does anyone need clarification or have any follow-up questions? Don't see any. How many people are required for a majority vote in the EPC? Does this number include the chair and co-chair?
2/3 majority. However, we never received any applications for the EPC this year, so it was just Kathy and myself. In the event that we did disagree, I'd imagine we'd reach out to Chris in that point. But luckily, when I picked my co-chair, I picked someone that I knew I worked well with. So there was not an instance where we disagreed. Had that happened, we would have reached out to Chris.
Any clarification? Oh, go ahead, Kathy. I'm sorry.
I also want to state that because there was the assumption that Cody was part of the EPC, even in the event that Cody was part of the EPC, 2/3 majority is still 2 out of 3 people, which would have been Ruby and I.
Are there any follow-up questions or need for clarification? Hearing none, seeing none, we will move on to our next question. Did the right Mutumbo slate issue an intent to run form previous to the pre-amendment SEC due date? If not, is their ability to run in itself a contradiction of the SEC? Let me put that in the chat.
So the right Mutumbo slate did not submit an intent to run form until the emergency meeting was had to change the deadline. It was after that change was made that they submitted an intent to run form. So at the time that the first SEC went up, the only slate that had submitted an intent to run form within the proper time was the Morris Doris campaign.
Kathy, are you laughing at the Morris Doris? That's funny. It rhymes. It rhymes. Before we continue, I do want to say to the EPC and the co-chair and anyone who's going to speak, do feel free to speak. You don't have to raise your hand because there's a chance I might not see it because I'm going back and forth. So feel free to speak after questions have been asked whenever you'd like. That said, do we have any follow-up questions or need for clarification? Hearing none, seeing none. We'll move on to our next. Is there a difference in procedure for EPC issued demerits versus student issued complaints to the EPC?
Yeah, and I did outline that as best as I could in my statement because I know that was one of the main issues that was brought up on Wednesday. And you can clearly see there's 2 different statements. Dakota, you highlighted one of them on Wednesday. When the EPC is aware of a violation, they can issue a demerit for that. If a complaint is submitted, the EPC only has the power to take statements, conduct interviews, an investigation, if you will, and then write a formal report and submit it to the Judicial Council. So for every complaint that we received, Kathy and I met, we discussed. For all of the complaints that were submitted, there was multiple pictures and multiple video evidence. So we did not feel the need to take statements or conduct an interview. We just wrote up a report, sent it to the Judicial Council, and forwarded along all the evidence and the complaint that we had issued. Not the complaint we had issued, the complaint we had received. My apologies. Yeah, so that would be the difference in procedures. Also, I do also want to point out that both slates were aware of this difference in procedure. There was a meeting where all of us were present and Chris himself outlined why there was differences in procedures.
I just want to elaborate on that. The difference in procedure exists purely to pursue an unbiased opinion on all of the complaints and the demerits that come in. The Judicial Council serves as like the unbiased barrier between student complaints and a demerit.
Thank you both. Any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to our next question. That is there a minimum number of individuals required to be on the EPC, or is it solely up to the senators and representatives who choose to volunteer their time and sign up?
There is no required mandatory number of individuals. Last year, we saw the only members of the EPC were Benjamin Johnson and Tori, why am I forgetting your last name? I'm so sorry. Oh, I feel bad. But yeah, the only members of the EPC last year were Tori Morris. There we go. I wanted to say Morris. But yeah, they were the only individuals. And to my knowledge, they never received complaints like this for being the only 2 individuals. So.
Is there any need for clarification or follow-up?
I do just want to add, if this is considered to be a large issue, again, the SEC went up twice to the legislative body. So if anyone is finding an issue with that, feel free to bring that up next year.
I also want to add that the EPC is only keeping students from being biased parties during the election or running for office. Essentially, if you were to join the EPC, you just can't endorse a candidate. You can't really run around saying, I prefer this candidate over the other. You have to remain unbiased. You can still vote for whoever you want. You can still like do what you have to do as like your own individual student mind and body. But there's really like no downsides to joining the EPC, and a way to keep just 2 people from running the show is to join the show. Joining the EPC gives you like a lot of power over how the campaign gets run because you're helping us to run it. And had more people joined, we would have had to have more meetings, and we would have had more voices in the room.
Thank you.
I do also want to mention that I disclosed to the legislative body that applications were open multiple times, and I still never received any application. Besides Alexander Lawrence, he didn't submit an application. He just asked to be on the EPC. But again, he's the only student that ever showed interest in being on the EPC.
Also, you don't have to be a senator or a representative to be in the EPC, to my knowledge. You can just be a student that wants to be involved in the election. So it's like really open.
Thank you. Any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Okay. Next question is, why is it rigged?
Well, I think both of our statements showed that this election was not rigged. And if there was at any chance where you thought that Kathy and I were not capable of doing our jobs, then you should have submitted a complaint following the SEC. Also, I would just like to add that the only demerit that Kathy and I submitted or issued was one. There are multiple others issued by the Judicial Council, which is an unbiased body, and many of you don't even know who is on the Judicial Council. So I think it's quite funny that you think this election is rigged.
Any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on. Do you think it is acceptable for the EPC to violate the SEC?
I don't think it's acceptable. And if anyone ever thought that the EPC did violate the SEC, then they should submit a complaint following the SEC. Since that deadline is closed, we are past that time. Also, I would like to point out that Kathy and I wouldn't knowingly violate the SEC, since we're the one that wrote it and spent multiple nights going over it to ensure that we very well knew the SEC.
Any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none, we'll move on to the next question. This question is similar to the last one, so I'll assume your response is the same, but how do you justify violating the SEC while trying to hold others accountable to it?
If you thought there was a violation of the SEC, you are more than welcome to submit a complaint and have the Judicial Council formally investigate the EPC.
Any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Ashley, did you want to say something?
I had a question. Is there any chance where we can, like, are you able to, like, I know you're reading out speculator. Wow, that is a word today.
Leaving out speculative questions.
Speculative questions. Is there any way that we can, like, weed out repetitive questions?
I can start doing that if you'd like.
As a lot of these questions seem to be very repetitive, and so we're kind of sounding like a little bit of a broken record, I think.
That is fair enough. I will attempt to weed out.
I do want to add something with regards to SEC violations and the EPC violating the SEC. Two things which have already been stated, but I will state again. One, you can amend the SEC when it goes up to be voted on within the legislative body. Any representative, any senator can make a motion to amend it. We've amended many other documents in the past. Two, ways to keep this from happening in the future, if you really do believe this happened, is to make sure that you talk to Ruby and I before the end of the school year so that we can try to give advice to the next RBA chair or vice president of RBA. Sorry, I'm still not used to the vice president names. The next vice president of RBA so that they can recreate the SEC with those suggestions in mind.
Thank you. Any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none. That's speculative. I'm going to have to read these over first, so give me a minute. Okay, this one is also speculative. Okay, here's one that's not entirely. For future years, if both candidate slates have 3 demerits and are disqualified, meaning to shorten that up, if both slates are disqualified, how is a second election started?
So if both slates get disqualified, it actually becomes a legislative body race in which the legislative body then has full control over the election and who makes it to be president and vice president. So in this hypothetical situation, a senator or representative would likely then become president and then vice president of WSA.
And if anyone has a problem with that, the SEC goes up again next year, and you can feel free to add a procedure.
Thank you. Is there any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none, we will move on to our next question. Okay, if a candidate slate is disqualified for demerits, can they apply as a slate in the following election? Same or following year. So if a candidate is disqualified, can they run again the following year?
There is nothing in the SEC that states you cannot run for a candidate in consecutive years. All that it does disclose about candidates that are disqualified is that they must cease campaign procedures immediately. So there is nothing to stop disqualified candidates from running again in the following year.
Additionally, the only people that can't actually run for president during that year are members of the EPC.
Thank you. Is there any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Hearing none, seeing none, moving on to our next question. What happened? It seems the same question was submitted twice. Okay. What was it? Yeah, it was. Okay. You all have been getting a lot of questions and getting integrated lately. How do you all feel about everything going on, and what is something that you think people should know and understand about all of this? I assume all of this regarding the election.
Well, first of all, what I think people should know and understand is the EPC only made one demerit. We followed the procedures and turned everything over to the Judicial Council. So all of this Dakota, I'm going to use the word corrupt again, just because it's in my head. All of these speculations that Kathy and I are biased or are acting against Jacoby and Jesse and that we don't want them to win. There was only one instance where we made a decision that you could say was biased because we issued one demerit. Everything we sent everything to the judicial council. So if people are questioning the election, the attacks should not be coming to the EPC because Kathy and I made one decision out of the other 4 decisions that resulted in the disqualification. So, and also what you should understand is we're all students. Like, Ashley is not a certified Chief Justice. She didn't go to law school. I'm not a political scientist or a politician. We're full-time students. We did this because we have a passion for this organization. The only reason I did not resign when every other cabinet member was resigning was because I wanted to run an election. So like, I don't know. Like, I don't know what kind of thoughts people are having about Kathy and I and Ashley and the Judicial Council, but like, we're just students who thought it'd be fun. So, yeah, that's what I have to say. I don't want to ramble.
Chief Justice Putnam Murray, you may go.
Hi. So I just want to make everyone clearly understandable that the Judicial Council we are an unbiased party that takes all the information that is brought to us and makes the best decision that we feel is best to interpret the SEC, the Constitution, and the bylaws that us legislators and have had with us all year. And like Ruby said before, I am a full-time student. I am not a lawyer. I did not go to law school. I am not a certified Chief Justice. I'm not. I know that, you know, I'm doing this because I purely love this organization. It's my first year, and I felt like, you know, this was something really kind of cool for me to do. I have a passion for law. I have a passion for government. I'm a political science major. This is my bread and butter kind of. And so I felt, and I feel that a lot of people don't understand that the Judicial Council we don't do very much at all throughout the year unless we get any sort of RSO complaints or anything like that. We don't do much. This is like our kind of big, huge time is elections. And this happened to be one of the election years where we had a lot. And we worked to the best of our abilities. I would like for all of you to know that, yes, we were a little bit on a delayer side because we did also have spring break that we that we decided to take a break because my justices, like, they are volunteers. They are not paid position people. They are also full-time students. I was working around their time to make sure that I wasn't overwhelming them as well. And so I would just like for everyone to understand that as well, is that this was none of my intent or my counsel's intent to make anything go as long as it did. And I understand that it is very frustrating for everyone. I was getting a little bit straight because I didn't like how prolonged this was, but I was following the best of what I could and following the best to make sure that this organization had the best representatives possible for this upcoming year.
I don't think any of us were particularly happy with how long this got dragged out for, mostly because this, like, as the longer it went on, the more what's the word? The harder it would be for the next presidential or candidates to actually get started for the next year. And so we wanted this to be done and over with as soon as possible. However, that does not mean that we cannot follow this through to its completion. And that doesn't mean that we can rush it. And that most definitely doesn't mean that we can just overlook very necessary details in order to make sure that the whole process still remains unbiased and fair. I understand it doesn't feel fair to some people involved. We followed the processes that were outlined at the beginning of the semester, the processes that were also established last year. A lot of the people involved, this isn't their first time in the election. A lot of people involved were also active last year during that election process, and Ruby and I only changed stuff to accommodate COVID, really, when the new SEC went up. So a lot of these rules did not change suddenly because Ruby and I became the vice president and co-chair. The ways in which the election ran this year and the reason why it took so long is because we had to assess these demerits that came in quite literally during election week, which was followed by spring break, which everybody took off because, again, we are students and we all had midterms. And then we had 2 weeks with which to hear all of these demerits, and then also to go through the appeals, because you have the right to appeal the demerits that you're issued. And then after that point, we had to start talking about the unprecedented nature of a disqualification, because that has never happened before. And at that point, there's no rules really there are rules with which to guide us, but nobody ever thought that we would have to be where we are right now. We had to write the precedent with which many people will hopefully look back on and think that they can make something better come out of it. And hopefully, we won't hopefully there won't be another disqualification, but if there is, we've at least provided some kind of system with which people can build off of to make a better system, but it's got to start somewhere.
Is there any need for clarification or follow-up questions? Seeing none, our final question is speculative, so that brings us to a close for questions. Are there any closing statements from our members here?
I completely forgot to submit to even write a closing statement. This is impromptu. I just want to say thank you to the Senate for requesting this special meeting. I was not available to attend Senate on Wednesday, and when I looked on my phone, I had multiple texts and messages saying, get in Senate, and I was very confused. But I'm very glad we could have this session with Kathy and myself present to answer questions, clear everything up. Transparency has been an issue throughout this entire year. And I hope that we were able to provide some transparency around this election. It is unfortunate that you were all kept in the dark for so long. But as Ashley mentioned earlier, the reason that confidentiality and non-disclosure of information is in the SEC is to allow for the Judicial Council to be unbiased, to not have this information. So yes, it's unfortunate, but it is the best procedure that we have in order to ensure an unbiased counsel. So again, I just want to thank you all for your time and allowing us to be here to give our side, because everyone else has given their side.
I just want to reiterate that this organization is an organization that has become very important to me. I did not want to be a part of WSA when I joined WSA. When we start talking about the bi-house split that we created into this year, the conversation was, how do we let people who just want to show up for funding just show up for funding, and how do we let people who want to show up and vote and be involved show up and be involved? And that's why we have the House and Senate. I was very much, when I joined WSA, only interested in securing funding for my org that I love dearly, Focus Kalamazoo. I wanted nothing to do with any of this. What I did not anticipate was meeting a whole bunch of people that made me want to be a really cool and involved person. I started enjoying going to WSA. I started getting coffee with Henry before meetings. I met a lot of friends. I got involved in an election circuit. That's not something I would have ever cared about. Why did I do that? And WSA is a very special organization because it allows those of us who are politically, I'm sorry, Henry, you can't have caffeine. You always got tea, decaffeinated tea. it allows us to meet with people who are like-minded and who are politically motivated, and usually student leaders, to get into one room so that we can actually engage and do something fun. And there was never a moment in which I have gone to a WSA meeting and thought, wow, that was a waste of my time. I always met cool people. I got to meet cool student leaders. And my only regret was having to resign at the beginning of this year because I had to make $8,000 appear out of nowhere because Western doesn't know how to operate financial aid. Like, that's not our fault. And I mean that in the most gentlest way possible. It's not Western's fault. It's the government's fault. It should be free. But like, we would not be here had people not been passionate enough about WMU to create this organization. And we are all here because we love WMU. As much as we love to also rag on WMU, we love WMU. Otherwise we would transfer. And so really keep that in mind. Every single person involved in this org, every single person who shows up to this org is here because we love the org, and we are an RSO and we're a community. And because of that, it really sucks when we start lashing out and hurting each other because we are all so passionate about what we are trying to reach. So I also did not put a closing statement together, so that was very improv. I apologize, but this is my last year doing student engagement. Not for this reason, just because I've been here for 5 years and I'm ready to focus on school and get out finally. But I do want to thank you guys, because I don't think I will be at another WSA meeting, for giving me like a really cool 2 years in student government and making me have a lot of fun. So thanks.
I didn't have an opening or a closer, so this is all going to be impromptu. I just want to say thank you to everyone for your patience, your time, and your dedication to this organization. Like Ruby and Kathy have both said, this is a special organization. I am so grateful to be a part of this organization. It's my first year being active, involved in this organization. I always knew about WSA. I always knew what was going on, but this was my first really hands-on in, and I don't regret one bit of it. I've enjoyed my time. I have met some of the coolest people in the world. I've gotten to work with some really amazing justices who I wish could come to meetings, and I wish could get like introduced to you guys, because they are very passionate about WSA, and they're very passionate about WMU as well. And I want to speak on behalf of them that they want to thank you guys for being very patient with them. They worked extremely hard to get this election certified, and a lot of work behind closed doors happened that would, unfortunately, you guys are not allowed to see due to confidentiality and just protection of the people who filed the complaints. But again, I just want to thank you. I'm hoping I can be able to be around for WSA one more year as I finish up. But yep, I just want to thank you guys all for this great experience.
Go ahead, Ruby.
All right, so we did not have quorum today. This would have been considered a legislative session since we have members of the Senate and the House here. It was our hope that we could swear in Alexis and Eric today so that they could have some necessary cabinet members go up for confirmation next week. There does need to be a vice president of allocations confirmed and a chief justice confirmed before we let out for the year. So with Alexis and Eric not being able to be sworn in until next Wednesday, that means essentially they have until next Wednesday to also pick a vice president for allocations and chief justice. So if you are at all interested in serving on the cabinet, please reach out to them. Even though they're not sworn in, they can still do that search. So if you have any interest, feel free to reach out to them, because no one anticipated them to have a 5-6 day time crunch to elect some cabinet members. So that's my additional statement.
Thank you. I'd like to end by just reiterating something that was said in the Senate meeting last Wednesday, is that we are all friends here, no illusion. And I hope we can continue to go on, and as this time has passed officially, that if any hard feelings were made, they can be mended and we can move forward friendly. Go ahead, Kathy.
This isn't really an additional statement. This is just me talking to you for a sec, Dakota. I do want to say that unfortunately the speaker tends to come under fire quite a bit because you are the most vocal voice in the legislative body. And none of us took what you said to heart. It was just that you were the person giving voice to it. And so unfortunately there had to be like something attached to it. So please keep that in mind. I wish no ill will towards you. You are a wonderful person. You did a great job this year being speaker, and I hope that you can continue rising to greater heights, Dakota.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Shayna, the same goes to you, Shayna. I see you more frequently because I'm actually in the house, but I want you to know that's not an exclusive compliment.
Thank you.
Well, with that, I'd like to thank you all for being here. Thank you for answering the questions the Senate and the House and others who had the form link have asked. We do appreciate it. With nothing left to be said, as it seems, this meeting is adjourned. There's no quorum, so I'm not gonna hit my gavel and end it. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all to the attendees who came and listened and submitted questions. You are appreciated. And to the EPC, the Judicial Council, and my co-worker, Shayna, you were all appreciated as well. So with that, and Eric, thank you for setting this up. With that, the meeting is over. So thank you all for coming, and we are adjourned.